I'm going to cover 5 ways that you should market your athlete to college coaches if they are not a star. Because your kid doesn't necessarily need to be the cream of the crop in order to play at the next level or play at a low-level Division I school or get a scholarship. And we all know those athletes who have an incredible opportunity at a big school with money, and we're looking at them going, how? Right? It doesn't feel like that matches up. And if you're a parent, you've probably been frustrated by this before, where you're looking at your kid and you're going, my kid is better than that kid. How come that kid got the opportunity? And the answer is that that kid marketed themselves better. So in this video, I want to show you 5 ways that you can market your kid better so they're the ones who get a same or similar opportunity. The first thing that you need to do is you need to compete on what's called subjective terms. Okay. Now there's 2 types of terms, subjective and objective. Objective terms are where a standard is set and you either meet the standard or you don't. It's very black and white. So for instance, let's say I'm a college football coach and I am looking for players who can run a 4.6 40 or below. And then some athlete reaches out to me and they tell me that they run a 4.9. Am I going to be interested in this athlete? No. Right? They simply don't meet the standard that I am looking for. And so if your kid is not a star, there's a good chance that on paper, they don't stack up well against those who are. That's basically the definition of someone who is not a star. And so instead of competing on objective terms, you want to compete on subjective terms. Subjective terms are based on opinions. It's something where 2 people can look at the same athlete and have differing opinions. And because your kid is not necessarily a star, that is where you want to live. Now, this isn't going to be possible in every single sport. So for instance, something like swimming or track and field, you're not going to be able to compete on subjective terms because they're time-based. So you're either fast or you're not, and that's kind of it. But in skill-based sports, which is, baseball, basketball, football, soccer, lacrosse, volleyball, softball, water polo, like all of those sports are skill-based sports and you can compete on subjective terms. And so that's where you want to live. So for instance, you should not be, when you are communicating with college coaches, you should not be sharing things like stats, right? You should not be sharing things like biometrics. You should not be sharing things like week awards or accomplishments. So for instance, if your kid won team captain or MVP in the 6th grade for their club team, that's not the kind of thing that you want to share. That's not going to stack up to somebody who's all state or all conference, right? So this would be where you're competing on objective terms. And we don't want to do that because guess what? Your kid is a star. You're not going to win this game. So instead, you want to compete on subjective terms where there are opinions. And for skill-based sports, that almost always means competing on video. Because the reality is that 2 coaches could watch the same player and have 2 completely different opinions. This actually happened for me. I had Virginia Tech and Mississippi State come and watch me at the exact same game. And obviously for my sport, Mississippi State was way better than Virginia Tech. So you would think that it would be harder for me to get to Mississippi State than Virginia Tech. Here's what happened. After that game, Virginia Tech told me, we don't think you're good enough for our program. And Mississippi State said, oh my gosh, you're amazing. We'd love to give you a scholarship. Even though Mississippi State was the better school, it doesn't make any sense. How did that happen? Because I competed on subjective terms. They were watching a game. They weren't looking at a piece of paper and seeing black and white whether I measured up or not. Different coaches have different opinions. And if your kid is not a star, you want to compete on subjective terms every opportunity that you can get, and you want to avoid objective terms as often as possible, okay? Second thing, you want to communicate from a position of strength. Now, what does this mean, all right? For a lot of athletes who are not necessarily stars, they don't have a bunch of coaches that are flocking around them, right? So you might get someone who's talking to one school. And what happens is because that athlete is only talking to one school, they come off as very desperate, right? Because it's not like they have 10 schools who are lined up behind them, ready to offer them. And so they come off as very desperate. And what this does is it lowers your recruiting stock. It lowers how college coaches view you. And the funny thing is that even if your kid is not a star athlete and you're not talking to a bunch of schools, you still want it to feel like you are. You want it to feel like you're talking to 10 schools and that when, an 11th school comes along, you don't care. You don't care because you already have 10 of them in the pipeline. Now, the tricky thing is that if your kid is not a star, you probably don't have this right here, right? But you need to make it feel like you do. So there's a couple phrases that a lot of families will use when they are acting desperate. They'll say things like, I hope I can play for your school. Am I good enough? Or, this is my dream school. And the reality is that phrases like that lower your status. It is clear that you are down here. The school is up here. This is where you would like to be, but you are down here and you are trying to reach well above your weight, where you belong. You're hoping that the school will do you a favor and pull you up. But the thing is that a school is not getting the better end of the deal when that happens. You want the school to feel like they are lucky to have you. And so it should feel like the opposite. It should feel like you are up here, right? And you have all these schools that are interested in you. And there's this other school right down here. And they're looking at you going, dang, we would really like that player. They're probably above where we are, but man, they would really help us out. You want it to feel like this situation right here, even if you're this player who only has one school that's interested. And so the way that you communicate with schools, it cannot have any stench of desperation. You can't be saying, I hope that this could happen, right? Think about LeBron James. LeBron James, one of the best basketball players of all time. If LeBron James was in the college recruiting process and marketing himself to college coaches, do you think that he would be asking those schools, hey, do you think I'm good enough for your school? Like, I hope I can play for you. Of course not. All of those schools would be like, oh my gosh, LeBron James, that would be huge for us. And so you want to market yourself like you're LeBron James, even if you're not, because that is going to give schools the perception that you are high value, not low value. And too many families see that their kid is maybe not the best player, and then they market them like they're not the best player. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that you can make. You're going to have a really hard time getting interest if you do that. The third thing is you want your best attributes first, okay? In the first conversation that you ever have with college coaches. And that means sending them an email, sending them a DM, posting content on social media. You only want to showcase your best attributes. I love families who are super honest, right? And they're like, listen, we know that our kid is not the best. They look at their kid's full game, like, every piece of their kid's game. And they're like, yeah, like 75% of our kid's game is really not that good, but 25% actually is. And so what ends up happening is, like 25%, this amount right here, that's where the kid is actually talented. All the other facets of the kid's game, all of this over here is not really that good. And what I see a lot of families do is they market this entire picture to college coaches. So college coaches see that 75% of the game is no good, and they don't even care about the 25% anymore because they're like, look at all of that. What you want to do is you want to market this piece right here first and only in the beginning. So college coaches only see this incredible piece right here. And here's the thing. They are eventually going to find out about all of this crappy stuff. They're going to find out about your kid's weaknesses, the places where your kid is maybe not the best. But the thing is, if their view of this 25% is strong enough, it will compensate for these areas of weakness. But that is marketing, where you want your most, strong attributes in the first conversation, because if you lead with all of this crappy stuff, you're not going to ever get in contact with coaches to the point where they actually see the good stuff. And so there's so many families who are trying to be honest and they're trying to market the whole picture. You don't want to market the whole picture. You want to market your best attributes first. Coaches will find out about your kids' weaknesses. They will. I promise you, we're not going to hide them forever. but you want to keep them out of the first conversation so that coaches see your good stuff. They see this and they go, ooh, that was really good. So let's say that their level of confidence, if this is their level of confidence, right? Their level of confidence when they see this first part, it surges and it goes up, right? And they're like, wow, this kid is super talented. Then they come across all of this crappy stuff. And what happens? This drops, but it doesn't drop all the way down here, right? Because the coach still really liked this early stuff. And so now what you can do is instead of continuing to decline here, you then show more good attributes over time. And this can actually either plateau or even increase a little bit. And this is the line of offers where like above this, you're getting money, and below this, you're not. You're missing out. And so you want to continue to market your kid's best attributes. I talked to a family a day or two ago, and their kid, wasn't the biggest, wasn't the strongest, but the one thing that kid has is speed. Like he's really, really quick. So guess what we're going to do? We're just going to hone in on speed. Like we're going to make sure coaches understand fully how fast this kid is. And we're going to show it in lots of different ways, because what's interesting is we talked about subjective versus objective terms. So for this kid, in terms of size, we would lose on objective terms, right? In terms of strength, we would lose in objective terms. But in speed, guess what? We can actually compete in objective terms. So there, we might actually include something like a speed stat or something like that, because he can actually compete there. And so this is marketing. It's a combination of all of these factors to showcase your kid in the absolute best light. And in my experience, there's a lot of families whose kids are totally capable of getting these opportunities, but they're marketing them like they're terrible, right? It's sort of like marketing a 5-star meal at a Michelin restaurant like it's McDonald's. It's like, man, yeah, but can you put it on a silver platter? Can you add like a little bit of cilantro? Maybe you do that sauce thing on the plate, where they draw like the squiggly lines and it makes it look fancy. Like, can we make it look like a Michelin star meal rather than McDonald's, even if it's an Arby's level meal? That's really what we're looking to do. All right. Fourth thing, you need to play the long game, okay? Because here's the deal. Your kid, because they're not an incredible star, is not going to send an email to a coach and then immediately get an offer. It's not going to happen because your kid is not incredible. So what's going to end up happening is you're going to send an email right here, and then the coach is going to watch one of your videos, and then they're going to watch another one of your videos, and then they're going to have a phone call with you, and then they're going to watch another video, and then they're going to have a phone call, right? And this is just going to keep going all the way until the point where you earn a scholarship or not, right? And so the thing is, for super talented players, their process might be really short like this, but for your kid who is not a star, it's going to look more like this second one. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't eventually get to the point where you earn an offer. It just means that you have a lot more steps. And so you're probably going to need, especially if you're trying to punch above your weight and your kid is a D2 caliber player, but you're trying to go D1. In order for that to happen, you're going to need that college coach to be recruiting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different players, right? And your kid is the 7th, and your kid is not as talented as these other 6. And what you're going to need to have happen is you're going to need the first player gets hurt, and the second player commits to a different school, and so does the third player. The fourth player can't really make up his mind. He's like sort of interested, maybe not. The fifth player, he's not interested either. Sixth player has academic issues. He can't get into the school. And so now you're really only competing with one other player at this point. So guess what? Simply because you hung in the game long enough for this entire piece, you have a chance at competing for that spot. And then, the school really wants this guy right here because he's a little bit better than your kid. But this guy right here, he also decides to commit somewhere else. Guess who ends up getting the spot? Yeah, your kid. Only because you stayed in the game long enough. If your kid is not a star, expect the process to take a long time. 8 to 12 months, sometimes even longer than that. And that's okay, because the ones who stay in the game long enough are the ones who usually win and get the best opportunities, especially if their kid is not a top caliber player. So you have to expect that you're going to be in this process for a long time if your kid is not exactly the cream of the crop. The last thing here is mass exposure. Okay? If your kid is not leading all the rankings, they're not on top prospect lists, they're not getting written up in blogs and articles, then you cannot get away with contacting 20 schools. It's simply not going to happen. Because remember, this whole long game here, you're going to have lots of schools who are going to go through this process, but some of these players are actually going to commit to their school. And so you're going to have to do this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And if your kid is not a star, you're going to lose a lot of these. And so you need this times like 100, right? Because then maybe, just maybe, you get 3 to 5 schools that say, okay, we need to land on this kid right here. So you need mass exposure. The kid who is super talented, right? He's an absolute star. This kid can contact 20 to 30 schools and probably be okay, because he's going to get found basically no matter what. But your kid down here who is not a star, who is supremely average but good enough to play in college, probably need to contact 100 plus. You should also be contacting multiple divisions. You should be contacting D1, D2, D3, NAIA, and junior college. You should be contacting all of them. Even if you're not interested in some of these other schools, right? You might say, Jack, my kid is not Division I caliber, but we're really interested in D2, D3 schools. We're not really interested in junior colleges and NAIA schools, which I think is a mistake. But even if that's the case, you should still contact these schools. Why? Because of the second point here that we made, which is that you want to contact from a position of strength. And if you are talking to 10 schools, even if 8 of those are NAIAs and JCs, you still look more attractive to the D2s and D3s because other people want you and you're a threat to commit. You might just commit to that NAIA school that's a great fit for you, that's 45 minutes from your house. And if one of these D2 or D3 schools really want you, they can't have that. And so you need mass exposure to multiple division levels to generate as much buzz and as much momentum as you possibly can. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have a higher drop-off rate than most people, right? So like I said, of the 20 here that this kid sends, they might end up getting, 7 responses because the kid is just that good. But in your case, you're going to have a significantly higher drop-off rate. And so out of the 100, you might only have 5, even though you contacted 5 times as many, right? And so the idea here is that you need mass exposure if your kid is not a star. You need to open up your brain and your options to as many as it can possibly handle, and then see what you're left with at the end. But I see a lot of families whose kids are not stars and they just start, so low on the filtering side. You look at this triangle, and I've talked about this before. There's families who say, yeah, we're only interested in these 15 schools in the beginning, right? And then they struggle to get interest and they go, okay, we need to expand. And then they go to 50 down here. And then they go, oh, we're still struggling, we need to expand. And then they go to 100 down here. But the problem is that they lost 6 months here and they lost an additional 6 months here. So they wasted 12 months before they contacted a large number of schools. If your kid is not a star, you want to do the opposite. And in fact, I recommend doing the opposite even if your kid is a star, because you will get way more interest, offers, and money. So ideally, you want to flip the triangle on its head, and you want to contact a whole bunch of schools in the beginning. And then let's say only, 10 of them show interest or something like that. And then of those 10, you end up getting 3 to 5 offers. Fantastic. That's a much better situation than what happened over here. So you need mass exposure. So if your kid is not a star, these are the 5 places that I would start first when you're marketing your kid. You want to compete on subjective terms, not objective terms. You want to contact from a position of strength, not weakness. You want to showcase your kid's best attributes in the first conversation, and you want to prolong the time when a coach is going to find out about their weaknesses. They will find out eventually, but you want to prolong that. You want to play the long game so that you let external forces in the recruiting process do some of the work for you and eliminate some of your competition. And then you want mass exposure. You want literally as many coaches as possible to know who your kid is, because you're going to have a higher attrition rate, a drop off rate than someone who is a super talented player or something like that. So you want to start wide and then you can filter as you go down. So if your kid is not a star, that's what I recommend doing. If you're a parent in the recruiting process and you're like, I don't really know how to navigate college recruiting, I want to be able to help my kid better, we have a program that is specifically for parents. So 95% of the families that we work with parents. We are here to help you, help your kid, and we can navigate the entire process with you, show you our entire process, how we are marketing athletes who are, cream of the crop, going Division I NIL deals, all the way to athletes who are not stars, who are just looking to grab some sort of spot in college recruiting. So if that's you, you're a parent who's interested in some help, you can click the button in the description or the link in the description to schedule a call with us. We'll walk you through what that program looks like. Otherwise, I will see you guys next time.